Hello. Hello. Uh, Vaibhav, is it,
Hello.
yeah,
हाँ
is it,
Shishi.
yeah. I am making you host, okay.
Okay, fine. No
So,
problem. No problem. You can make me host.
I'm leaving, huh? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you.
How are you now?
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Nikita, by that time you can share your screen.
Yeah, yes. So are you able to see it?
Yeah. I can see it. I can also hear you. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have any movies, you can test it now. Otherwise, it's okay.
I guess I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not able to go to the next slide. I don't know.
Oh, is it? I mean, you can try sharing again and yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's moving.
Hmm. I'm just curious to know the arrow keys, they don't work here or what?
No, I can see your cursor.
Okay, you can see the cursor, but
Yeah.
So we cannot go to the next slide by these arrow keys, like the arrow keys on the keyboard.
Well, you can. I mean, depends on the system that you are using. I mean,
I'm not able to do it that way.
I mean, I don't know which system are you using, Ubuntu or what?
Windows.
Windows. Then I have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
I haven't used Windows for almost a decade.
Mm.
So yeah. You haven't given presentations on Zoom before using
No,
Windows?
no, I haven't.
Okay, that's fine. Well, then I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so it's already 3:30. I think we should start. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Astrophysical Seminar of Aries. And today's speaker is Nikita Rawat. She is a Senior Research Fellow at Aries, and she will be talking about TESS observations of TX call, rapidly varying accretion flow. So over to you, Nikita.
Yeah, thank you. So, hi everyone. Good afternoon to all of you. I am Nikita Ravan, and I am here to present our work, which we have done with this very interesting object, TX call. It belongs to a subclass of cataclysmic variable. So I will start my talk with the introduction to cataclysmic variables. So cataclysmic variables are semi-detached binaries where one of the star fills its Roche lobe and other one remains well inside it, as you can see it from this figure. So the accretion, the matter starts accreting from this Lagrangian point L1 to the primary. So in case of CVs, the primary star is the white dwarf and secondary star is the red dwarf star of spectral type K or M. So CVs are basically characterized by strong X-ray emission and optical polarization, and the formation of an accretion disk or the presence of an accretion disk in case of CVs is completely dependent on the magnetic field of the white dwarf or magnetic field of the family. So I will proceed with the classification of cataclysmic variables. So CVs are categorized into two categories on the basis of the magnetic field of the primary. So when the magnetic field of primary is less than 10 to the power 5 Gauss, we say that it is a non-magnetic CV. And in the second case where magnetic field is greater than 10 to the power 5 Gauss, we say it is a magnetic CV. So magnetic CVs are further classified into two categories on the basis of the magnetic field strength. When magnetic field is greater than 10 megagauss, we say that it is a polar, and when magnetic field is in the range of 1 to 10 megagauss, we see that it is an intermediate polar. Since TX call belongs to this intermediate polar category, but before going into that, I will discuss what polars are. So polars, yeah. So polars generally have magnetic field strength in the range of 10 to 100 megagauss. Their orbital period lies from 1.6 to 8.3 hours. So in case of polars, because of the high magnetic field of primary, an accretion disk cannot form because the minimum value of magnetosphere radius is approximately equal to the 10 times of white dwarf radius, which in turn equals to the radius from the primary to the Lagrangian point L1. So this high magnetic field of primary prevents any formation of accretion disk, and because of this very reason, they are known as the synchronous systems, where the orbital period of the binary systems equals to the spin period of the white dwarf. So this picture is just an artistic illustration of polar, where you can see that matter is accreting from secondary to the primary, and along the magnetic field line, it is going into the polar caps to the polar caps of the primary. Next are the intermediate polars. So intermediate polars are characterized by the weak magnetic field of primary, generally in the range of 1 to 10 megagauss. Their orbital period lies in the
question, just to because I don't know the subject much.
Yeah.
Is there any knowledge about the polar's magnetic topology? I mean, this magnetic field, you showed the artist impression,
yeah,
but most
yeah.
people know what is the kind of magnetic structure. Yeah, I see there is a cartoon here also.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It is, yeah.
is it a multipolar kind of thing?
No, dipole. It's a dipole magnetic field.
So there is no quadrupolar moment and all that, but the simple dipole will be able.
Yeah, it's just a dipole magnetic field.
Mhm.
Now, if I may add here,
Yeah.
it is, I mean, any star with magnetized star, if you look from far, it is dipolar. The dipolar
Yeah.
field
Yeah.
is dominant.
That's the strongest. So,
It's strongest.
If you go close to it, there will be quadrupolar
Yeah.
and even octupolar components.
right.
But she is looking far away from that surface. So it's for her, I think it's.
And I was just
dipolar
wondering,
actually
since, you know, as she mentioned, that it is all within the Lagrangian point distance. So it is in that sense, I was thinking it is pretty close distance, but maybe the quadrupole is still not.
No, the Lagrangian point is not that close because it's a compact object, right? So its size is like Earth.
Yeah.
Dwarf,
Okay.
size is Earth. So it's not really a close by.
Okay. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Nikita, I have a basic question here. So
Yeah.
how do you measure the magnetic fields of these objects?
So by
observationally.
spectroscopy, by optical spectroscopy, we know that there is Riemann splitting,
Mhm.
and in the optical spectra we
Okay,
get
so
cyclotron humps, and by measuring the
Okay,
width of those humps, we get the magnetic field of these.
okay, okay. Thank you.
So yeah, in case of intermediate polar, their orbital period lies in the range of 1 to 50 hours, and IPs are generally the asynchronous systems, which asynchronous means the spin period of the white dwarf is generally 1/10 of the 1/10 of the orbital period of the binary systems. So before going into the scenarios for the formation of an accretion disk, I will just remind you with the terminologies which I have used. So RMU is the magnetosphere radius, which we get when we balance the ram pressure with the magnetic pressure. And R minimum is the distance from the primary at which the disk formation can start taking place, and it generally depends on the mass ratio of primary and secondary and the binary separation between the two. So R's, and third one is the R circularization, and it is that radius at which the material has the same angular momentum as it was having at the Lagrangian point L1. So there are three different scenarios. The first one is when the magnetosphere radius is less than R minimum. So in this case, since magnetosphere radius is very small, and in turn the magnetic field is smaller than the R minimum. So in this case, the accretion disk can form. While the second case, when R mu is greater than the circularization radius, in this case, the magnetic field is so strong that any attempt to form a disk fails, and accretion will always be a stream fed. In the intermediate case, where R mu is greater than R minimum but is less than R circularization, so if there are dense dimagnetic blobs which can get accumulate near R circularization, so in that case only a disk can form. So there are basically three. So there are basically three accretion mechanisms for an IP, and on the basis of these three, we decide.
I have a question. If you go back to this, so is it possible that it will go for different stages also, depending on because this third step looks to me pretty interesting also when you say this kind of dense diamond blobs. These are very typical of instabilities. So there could be a lot of these intermediate stages where instabilities can have in any magnetic environment. So I'm quite curious to know, is it possible to have, say, different stages of this evolution?
Yeah, sir, actually, in this case, there are cases like there are some IPs in which we have found quasi-periodic oscillation, and they are quasi-periodic oscillation. They are expressed when they are said to occur when these diamagnetic blobs, when the fluid is of the form of diamagnetic blobs. So we can say that it depends whether the source, which type of source is.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was just, sort of guessing that these kind of scenarios in magnetofluids do show quasi-periodicity because of all these instabilities. But I'm interested to know about the time scales and all those stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably she will show the results to us a little bit clearer than.
Okay.
So the first one is the diskless or stream-fed accretion. So in this case, the magnetic field is so strong that it prevents the formation of any accretion disk, and the matter is accreted along the magnetic field lines to the pole caps. So what happens is, for every rotation of a white dwarf, the accretion stream flips between the two poles twice. So in this way, we get a modulation at the beat frequency of spin and the orbital orbital of the binary system. So in this case, at any instant of time, material impacts on a single pole, either it is upper magnetic pole or a lower magnetic pole, but at any instant of time, it will be onto a single pole. So in the case of stream-fed or diskless accretion, we get modulation at beat frequencies. The next one is the disk-fed accretion. So in case of disk-fed accretion takes place via a disk, which is disrupted at the magnetosphere radius, and from this radius, matter is accreted along the magnetic field. Matter is accreted along the magnetic field lines to the pole caps. So what happens is, if we view along the upper magnetic pole, so our view of the upper accretion region, it is obscured by the infalling material, and much of the flux is either absorbed or scattered out of line of sight, and the lower pole is always behind the white dwarf. So in this case, the lower pole contributes no flux. But half a spin cycle later, when we view from side B, our view of the upper accretion region is unobscured, and we see more flux. So in this way, we get, as a white dwarf rotates, we get pulsation at spin frequency. So in this case also, because there is an accretion disk, so because of this disrupted disk, we get the material that impacts onto the both magnetic poles. The third scenario is the disk overflow accretion. So in this case, the majority of the accretion takes place via a disk, but a part of it flows over the disk and connect to the magnetosphere, and from along the magnetic field lines, it goes to the pole caps. So in this case also, since there is a disk, there is also a disk and stream-fed accretion also. So we get modulation at spin and beat frequencies. In this case also, material impacts onto the both magnetic field. So these were three different accretion mechanisms, and depending upon the presence of spin, beat, and other sidebands frequencies, we decide what is the accretion mechanism for the source. So before moving forward, I will give a brief timeline of our source, TX-call. So TX-call was discovered in 1984 as an optical counterpart of X-ray source. So in 1985, it was the first IP which showed beat pulse along with the spin pulse, and which suggested that both disk-fed and stream-fed accretion can occur simultaneously. Buckley and Tuohy, they found that it has an orbital period of 5.7 hours and spin period of 1911 seconds. In 1989, a periodicity at half of the beat period was found, and Norton et al. 1997, they concluded that there is a change in the accretion geometry of the TX-call, because in 1994 it showed strong spin pulsation but a weak signal at half of the beat period. But a year later, it showed a strong beat pulsation and a very weak spin signal. So, later on in 1999, Whitley showed that the change in the accretion mechanism in TX-call taking place over a time scale of a month. So when we started our work, we knew that TX-call has a varying accretion mechanism, but we didn't know that what is the actual time scale, whether it is a year or whether the accretion flow is changing on a time scale of months or a year. So to analyze that and to see whether the change in accretion mechanism, how the accretion mechanism is changing in TX-call, we use the optical data from TESS of the year 2018. So TESS observed TX-call in two sectors, sector 5 and sector 6, between November
Sorry,
28.
I'm interrupting, just trying to
Yeah.
understand the emission mechanism also. So these kind of objects, so isn't it also possible that the X-ray emission will come from a different part of the part of this whatever binary system which you are talking about, and then optical will be a different component and things like that?
Yeah, actually the optical is generally the reprocessing of X-rays of the different parts of the primary. Like when it is reprocessed via accretion disk or polar caps, it is shown to that it is it modulates at the spin frequency. But when the X-ray is reprocessed by a material by a part like hotspot, so hotspot is the part where the accretion stream first the first point of the interaction between the accretion stream and the primary. So if the matter is reprocessing from that spot, so we get optical beat modulations.
But are you able to resolve these objects, or you see it from a region? I do not know the again the details of the observations. So can you really pinpoint from where exactly this emission is coming from?
No, sir. Actually,
The white dwarf is very small, right? So I mean, I'm just trying to understand that can you really differentiate between the different parts of these two-body system, so to say?
Depending upon the inclination angle, generally we say we only see the primary, like we only see the white dwarf part, and these were the different models which interpret that whether depending upon which frequency we are getting, we said that okay, this is coming from the reprocessing material, or and further there were X-ray observation which actually tells us that from depending upon its thermal temperature and other properties, we say that whether it is actually coming from surface nearer to the white dwarf, or from a disk, or from a hotspot.
So this reprocessing time scale also is quite an important issue, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But generally the optical and X-ray, they follow each other. Like if there is a X-ray modulation at the spin frequency, there will always be a optical pulsation at the spin frequency also.
Okay.
Yeah. So TESS observed TX-call in two sectors, sector 5 and sector 6, between November 2018 to January 2019 at a 2-minute cadence for almost 52 days, but there were gap of 4 days between these two observations. The TESS wavelength coverage is from 600 to 1100 nanometer. There are basically two science product of TESS, the target pixel file and the light curve file. And for our purpose, we have used this light curve file, which has two fluxes. The first one is the simple aperture photometry flux, and the second one is the pre-search data conditioned SAP flux, which is this SAP flux after removing the instrumental systematic variation and the background sources and the nearby crowd and the background subtraction and the crowding from the nearby stars. So for our purpose, we have taken data with quality flag 0 only, because and remove all the data which have quality flags greater than 0, considering the different significance of those fluxes. So the first part of our work, we have analyzed the complete data, complete 52 days data of TX call. And this is a light curve of TX call spanning over 52 days. And the red dots, they represents the mean flux of each day. So to confirm the periodic signals in this data, we have applied Lomskargel periodogram. The top panel of this figure is the Lomskargel periodogram, and this dotted black dotted line represents the 90% FAP level. With the FAP means false alarm probability level. So it tells that any frequency which is above this level is a true frequency and not because of the any data gap or not is the spurious frequency. The lower panel is the clean power spectra, which ensures that the frequencies which we have got in the Skargel periodogram is a true one and not because of the any spectral leakage or data gap. So by analyzing the complete data set, we have found an orbital period of 5.691 hour, spin period of 1909.5 seconds, and beat period of 2105.76 seconds, which is very well consistent with the earlier previous studies. But this was the result for the complete data set. But since we knew that the second part of our work to change the system, to really see the changes in the system on a time scale of 1 day, we divided our complete data set into 1 day time segments. And these 1 day time segments, they really covered the 4 orbital cycles of TX call. So as you can see that, from this, there are changes in the power spectra of TX call, where these positions are the position for orbital, beat, and spin frequency. And you can see that the power is changing day-wise. Although you can say that for majority of the time, the power of beat frequency is dominating over the spin and orbital frequencies. But there were few days when this frequency was completely absent, or where spin frequency was dominating over this beat frequencies. So to further confirm our this result, we have calculated the amplitude of modulations for spin and beat frequencies, and for that purpose we phase folded our data over the beat period and also for the spin period. And these are the beat phase folded light curves for each day. And similarly to the power spectra, there are changes in the amplitude of the beat modulation, and there were days where there was very insignificant modulation, like in case of days 60, 73, and 74. Similarly for beat folded, we have also folded our data for spin phase, and as you can also see that from day 38 to 89, there are changes in the spin amplitude, and for day 53, day 54, and 78, there is almost no spin modulation, which confirms that there is the spin frequency was not present in these 3 days. So this represents the contour plot for the same folded light curves. The left panel are the observed one, which we get after a sinusoidal fit to our phase folded data, and the right one is the values which we get after fitting over these data. So in this figure, we can also say that the beat modulation is, for the majority of the time, beat modulation is the dominant one over the spin modulation. And these two really matches with each other. So this is the ratio of the ratio of the spin modulation to beat ratio of the spin to beat amplitudes which we get after the fitting. So when this ratio is approximately equal to 1, we see that there is an equal dominance of both modulation, both spin and beat modulation. And when this ratio is greater than 1, we say that there is a dominance of spin modulation. And when this is less than 1, we say that there is a dominance of beat modulation. So this line represents that the equal dominance, and for very few of the days there were equal dominances. But if you can see that the first day of the observation and this point, these 2 points showed that so that these are the points of these are the days of the beat, the dominance of beat modulation. And similarly, this point and this point, this shows that there is a dominance of spin modulation. So, and similarly, if we go forward, this day corresponds to the beat dominance, and this day corresponds to the spin dominance. So if we look into these cycles, we from this figure, we interpret that the spin dominance cycle or a beat dominance cycle, it repeats after every 13 to 16 days cycle on an average. So to actually see the changes in the accretion geometry of TX call, we decide accretion mechanism on the basis of combination of presence of our spin, beat, and sideband frequencies in the power spectra on that particular day, and the amplitudes of spin and beat modulation which we get after the fitting. And by combining these two results in this table, we represent the accretion mechanism for each day. So at the very start of the observation, the TX call was accreting via disk overflow stream-fed dominance. But the later on the day 44, it changed to disk overflow. And again on the day 45, it again changed to disk overflow stream-fed accretion. And it goes on, but in the later day of day 53 and 54, it suddenly it showed that it was accreting via stream-fed accretion only. And as we go forward, for the day 59, the accretion mechanism was disk overflow, but the very next day it changed to disk-fed. So from these two tables, you can see that the accretion mechanism has changed on a time scale of 1 day. Also, for majority of the times, it was disk overflow stream-fed accretion, but for 3 days, it was a pure stream-fed accretion, and for 2 days, it was accreting via disk-fed accretion. So to conclude my talk, our main findings from this work was that the TX call, while there were studies that TX call was accreting on a TX call has a varying accretion mechanism on a time scale of a year or on a time scale of a months, but we here showed that the TX call has varying accretion mechanism which changes on a time scale of 1 day. Also, for the majority of times, TX call was accreting via a disk overflow accretion, but for rest 11% of the time, it was either a pure disk fed or a pure stream fed. And for the even in the disk overflow accretion, it for 89% of the time, it was accreting out of the 89% of the time, it was accreting via disk overflow stream-fed dominance for 71.1% and disk overflow with equal dominance for 13.3% and disk overflow with disk-fed dominance with only 4.4% of the observing time. So TX call switched its accretion mechanism from disk overflow to pure disk-fed on 2 occasions. And for the first time, we found out that a pure stream-fed accretion is also found to take place in TX call for 3 different days in between the observations. And from these observations, we found out that it appears that the disk dominant accretion and stream dominant accretion, they somehow repeat after every 13 to 16 days cycle, but we need more observation to actually confirm this result. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nikita. So if anyone has questions, please raise your hands. Okay, Dipanga sir, please go ahead.
Yeah, nice, Nikita.
Thank you.
So do we know, of course, you mentioned about the spin coming into play. This 13 to 16 days repetition time scale, how long it will go? I mean, first of all, why it has come in, you can explain by this bit and spin, I guess. But I mean, how long it will continue doing so? Is there some...
So actually, we don't have any correct information or correct explanation to this. This is the first time we have somehow argued that this could be possible, that there is a 13 to 16 days cycle. But as I said, that if we would have more observation, like if we could have more cycles, then we can actually tell that why what is the correct cycle, or how further it will be going, or how further it goes.
Mhm. So I was just wondering, so what kind of you need really very high level of photometry for this kind of...
Yeah, so actually it is a 52 the data which I have showed here, it spans over 52 days. So I guess we need more continuous observation, so we can actually we confirm what is the correct cycle, and
What point is, how accurate your measurements need to be. I mean, tests, if I recall correctly, it was for exoplanet discovery, right?
Yeah,
So means, it was looking for...
but it observes every star in that field at a 2-minute cadence theta, which is very fast cadence. It means that it is a very nice photometric cadence if we have to get the actual frequencies, or the actual short time cadence phenomena.
So how does it compare with other photometric things, like the emissions and all that?
So this is same as the Kepler K2, but it has more advantage of the short cadence over the Kepler observation, and it has actually a fast cadence mode also, which observe at 20 seconds after every 20 seconds.
But why do you need such high cadence? Because in your case, it is only days, which is seems to be, you're trying to capture.
No, spin period is too low actually.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, spin is like 1910 seconds. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, even if the ground-based photometry cannot do this thing actually.
That's why
it's
I
a
was
continuous
trying to
52 days
understand.
data, so otherwise it's rather impossible to say.
Right. That's why I was just trying to understand that what are the limitations of getting this kind of either Kepler or this kind of sort of accuracies. Cadence. Okay.
Yeah, actually, sir, this if we have observed it on the ground-based telescope, I don't think so it would have been possible, because it shows that in every day its accretion geometry is changing, the power spectra is changing. So it could not have been possible with ground-based observations or ground-based observations.
What is the photometric good cadence we can achieve here from the ground?
Yeah, it depends on the brightness of the object.
Yeah, so of course,
magnitude. Yeah.
What is the magnitude here?
It is bright actually. It is 14.0 magnitude, V band magnitude of 14.0.
So what is that?
But it is a negative dex, so actually we cannot observe it from here also actually, for this specific object.
Okay, good.
Okay, Ritesh, please go ahead.
Hi, Nikita. So there was one slide where you showed the power spectra variation, I guess in 13th or 14th
Yeah.
slide.
Hmm.
Yeah, so here there are some intermediate frequencies other than the beat and spin frequency.
Yeah. Actually, these are the subharmonics of either beat or spin.
Okay.
But these subharmonics are not always present in the power spectra.
Actually, Nikita, you need to tell very in detail to the audience that what are the subharmonics indicates related to your this mechanism, that is whether it's a stream fed or disk fed. See, even if there are several harmonics, that is omega minus omega, and its harmonics with the orbital period, if you get it, then you will have other implication. Oh, this says that the disk is really confirmed. Okay, that's what the interpretation are there. Yeah, go ahead, Anita. Nikita, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Ritesh, can you please repeat your question?
These harmonic frequencies also play a role in the mechanism, that accretion mechanism, which we are discussing.
Yeah, actually, yeah, these sidebands, actually, these are the either orbital sidebands of the beat or orbital sidebands of the spin frequency, or various subharmonics like omega by 2, omega by n, any number, and beat by n, where n is any number. So when there is like if there is omega minus 2 omega, we say that there is that sideband is the lower orbital sideband of beat frequency. So this ensures that the beat frequency is present in the data, although it can be below this FAP level. So these sidebands actually tell whether the spin or beat frequency is present in the data, and which directly tells us that whether the accretion mechanism is stream fed or disk fed or a disk overflow. So these sidebands, they really play a role in deciding whether the accretion mechanism, what type of accretion mechanism is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Shilpa, it's your turn now. So you can ask questions.
Nikita, can you go to slide 4?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said that these accretion disks do not form because of the high magnetic field of the primary. So why is it so?
Because in this case, the magnetosphere radius, like it goes up to the Lagrangian point L1. So what happens is accretion stream, it directly flows along the magnetic field lines.
Okay. So directly it connects.
Yeah, it directly channeled along magnetic field lines. So there is directly channeled along magnetic field lines to the pole caps.
Thank you.
Okay, Varun, please go ahead and ask your question. Hello, Varun. Okay, if not, then Indranil, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello.
Okay, he's back. Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Hi, Nikita.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask whether, so TESS is mainly for exoplanet studies. How does one get to know what kind of other sources are observed with the TESS? And like, are there a source list in that?
Actually, you can
and then a follow-up it is that when they observe it, what kind of data products are available?
Actually, they observe like sector wise. In the first year of its observation, they actually observed the North Hemisphere, and the second year in 2019 they observed the Southern Hemisphere. So it actually scans every space of the sky. So and you can check it via MUST portal, the NASA's MUST, MAST, and you can check which objects they have observed till now and which sectors they have observed.
Okay. And then what kind of data products are available? For some sources, can the spectroscopy is also available?
No,
Or
no, no,
only,
no spectroscopy. It is
only
only
time.
yeah, photometric.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Indranil, you can ask a question.
Yeah. Okay. Nikita,
Yes.
you see, in your case, the accretion mechanism is changing, right? And you define the accretion mechanism based on the magnetic field of the central object. I mean, the white dwarf, right? So the magnetic field cannot change in days, right? So why do you think this accretion geometry is changing over a period
Yeah.
of days?
Yeah. So actually, sir, the magnetic field is not changing. The accretion, like in case of disk overflow, you can say that the disk is always present here, but accretion the stream, it is skipping the disk and directly flows over the disk. So in actual case, the magnetic field is not changing. The mass accretion rate, which is coming from the secondary to the primary, we are saying that the mass accretion rate is changing, because it so happens that sometimes like in case of this disk fed accretion, the mass is accreting via disk, and then when the disk is disrupted at the magnetosphere radius, it flows along the magnetic field lines to the pole caps. So the change in the mass accretion rate, it could be a possible reason for changing in the accretion geometry.
No, but mass accretion rate is being supplied near the Lagrange point, right? So that will affect the disk as well. So now, if it's
The amount of material in the disk and the thickness or the inner properties of the disk, it could change, but the magnetic field, it doesn't change in one single day.
yeah, that's fine. That's what I said. Magnetic field cannot change.
Yeah.
So something is going on with the accretion mechanism that is changing, so that your accretion mode is changing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is going on in the secondary that is causing this change? Are you getting my point?
Yeah, I'm.
No, you may not know the answer. I'm trying to say that this could be a good, focus on what kind
I
of
guess
observation.
for that we have to know the actual interest.
Is the secondary resolved?
Second, we have to
Is the
know.
secondary resolved?
I don't think so. No.
Can I join the discussion? I think Indranil has a point that, the secondary changes in the time scale, what you're talking about, days, doesn't seem to be very logical. I was thinking, is it possible that the inclination, you see, this is a 3D structure, you have put it in a thing, but your orientation or the, axis of rotation of this, highly magnetic rotating object, if that has something to do with the change in the flow patterns and so on. I mean, this is the ideal thing for Indranil for the simulation, right? Any 3D models should be able to do some things. Are people doing these things?
No, not yet. I haven't seen anyone doing such things. But
because even for a sort of accreting material, when as she has pointed out, you see, this is a one kind of one instance that you have this magnetic topology. Even if you have a dipole and the rotation axis is inclined to the axis of the accretion,
right,
if that spins, you have a retrograde motions and all that can will all have some effect, right? You get my point, Indranil? I mean, you guys are doing this.
Yeah. So Yeah, I mean, one has to see whether, one has to estimate if you're from the Lagrange point
Ah,
to the, where the magnetosphere hits, I mean, the accretion disk hits the magnetosphere and so on.
yeah.
Hmm.
What is the time scale that it will take from there to for the matter to reach? If
To
that
reach the
time scale
primary.
measurement is not matching, then one has to think about some other explanation.
That
So
is
that's
true.
Hmm.
so like if it wobbles, as Dipuda was telling, if it
Ah,
wobbles, then
yeah.
it will sort of, I mean, towards the secondary, if it is moving away from the secondary, the dynamics is changing there. Okay.
Mhm. So that relative changes, whether that has an effect of this flow pattern or accretion rate and things like that. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, these are ideal things for the simulators, I guess. And are these, relativistic effects are very important, or without that also people can work?
Not really, not really. I mean, even CVs are, I would say, 98% non-relativistic.
So these models are
Yeah.
possible. Why I'm asking is, non-relativistic simulations are comparatively easier. So are CVs, been modeled when simulated? This kind of effects?
I have no idea. I don't work on CV.
Some of them they simulated.
Huh?
Some of them they simulated. Some specific object they simulated.
Acha,
Not
acha. Yeah, not
yeah.
on this person who has given
Yeah.
all this, drawings.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, interesting.
Okay, if we do not have any further questions, let us thank Nikita again. And yeah, see you next week. Bye.
Yeah.